Let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yesterday, they lost Avonte Maddox, potential slot corner option for them, to the Philadelphia Eagles. He re-signs with them for a 1-year deal. Thought that was like the last golden opportunity for the Pittsburgh Steelers to add a slot corner, a guy that could come in here with plenty of starting experience. Obviously, he's dealing with some injuries over the past couple of years, but if he could stay healthy, he's pretty good when he's on the field. And I mean, me and you both agreed if you could go in there with him as your option A and still have an option B, it's a pretty good spot for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He leaves at the same time the Steelers bring in Nate Wiggins, Clemson cornerback, for a pre-draft visit. Very interesting name, considering the Steelers have not brought in big-time corners for pre-draft visits yet this season. That completes the trifecta: NFL Combine meeting, pre-draft visit, and their pro day. Probably took him out to dinner, but who knows? You look at the slot corner option before we dive into Wiggins. Concerning for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Without Maddox, where do you go next?
Yeah, it is a little bit concerning. And I think, you can look at kind of the dwindling number of free agents, but I mean, you're down to basically like, you want Rocky Sin, you
Yeah.
want Justin Bethel, you want Eli Apple, like
Yikes.
not a ton of appetizing options out there. And that's what leads me to kind of say, or leads me to believe that double dipping in the draft is where you go. I think a corner's got to be pretty high. I don't know. Maybe it's not as high as it was before you got Dante Jackson, but and it's a little risky just given that. I mean, you got limited picks, a lot of needs, like we've talked about all offseason. But I really think that they need to get a bona fide outside guy that they can feel confident in, and then later in the draft, maybe with one of those 7th-round picks, you go for a slot guy, a guy who's maybe a little smaller. Maybe that's affecting his draft stock. Maybe there are a bunch of guys like that. In this draft to think about. It's not Dante Hardy. It's the other Penn State corner, quite honestly.
Oh, Caleb King.
Yeah, Caleb King is an option down there. There's, sorry, I'm blanking on the name real quick. Let me just pull it up. Deontay Prince from Ole Miss. I like him a lot too, so I think he's got some speed that could be really useful. There are, I feel like, a bunch of corners at the end of this draft that are going to go that could be your option there. It's real risky. I would have felt much more comfortable with the veteran, but I don't know. If you're the Steelers, you kind of dragged your feet a little bit too long. And so if they wanted a veteran, I'm not sure there's one out there that's really going to make sense for them at this point, or that's going to be, that big of an upgrade over, whatever flyer you take on a 6th or 7th round rookie at this point, quite honestly.
Yeah, I agree. I thought Kalen King was a name that was interesting, but they just didn't show enough interest. And I think it's because, I don't know, for how small he is, and I mean, he is productive, but you kind of looked at him as undersized, definitely going to play in the slot in the NFL. I think his draft stock's a lot higher than the Steelers want it to be, and that's going to avoid them. Where is that? Is that second? Is it a deep pick for you? Like, is it like you got to go early, you got to go deep? Can you double dip early? Like, are you comfortable using a 4th-round pick to get a second corner if you're the Steelers, knowing you got other needs?
Not really, because I think, if you're using a high pick on a corner, if you're using something before the 3rd round on a cornerback, you still got to go get your center. I assume you're using your tackle. You're getting your tackle with your first round pick. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Then you still got to go to get a receiver. And I feel like the receiver, like I get it, slot corner. That's it's a need. It's something that they got to address. I don't think it's a bigger need than wide receiver at this point. So, I think the Steelers have kind of painted themselves into a corner a bit here. Like, whatever option they get to play the slot is not going to be super exciting, unless like, is it possible at all that Dante Jackson moves inside? Like, I'm not really sure about that. So, like, if you're using a 2nd or a 3rd on a corner, like, it would feel wrong to like just stick him in the slot. Like, that feels like a high enough pick that you should have confidence that he could be a starter on the outside. But then, you go any lower than that and you've got no guarantees about any of these guys actually being able to start on the inside even. So it's just, they have painted themselves into such a corner, and I understand they had other needs to address in free agency, but this is just going to be one we look back at this offseason and we think, for as good as this offseason has been for the Steelers, the slot corner stuff, a little bit concerning. And just the way they've managed the whole cornerback position, to be quite honest, it's didn't see like they just of all the positions that they've addressed and that they've kind of put to sleep, this is not one that they did. This is probably their biggest remaining concern. I'd be quite honest with you.
Yeah, so I agree with the Dante Jackson thing. I'll start there. I got two names that are on the roster that I want to toss at you too, but let's start with Dante Jackson. I don't think Dante Jackson can move inside. I think that's my concern there. Is everybody talks about like, oh, just draft a guy and then they could either play the slot or Dante could play the slot. I mean, that's a whole other position that you got to learn this deep into your NFL career. That's tough to do. And like people are talking about that with Patrick Peterson. I think Patrick Peterson is smart enough to make a move anywhere on the field. I think that mentally he'd be just fine to do so. Not every corner is built like that. And I don't think that Dante Jackson's a guy that you want to draft, especially for the speed, and look at him and say, hey, look at this is a dude who we finally have some outside speed to keep up with Jamar Chase and Tyreek Hill and whoever else we got to play that has that dominating speed. But let's stick him on the inside to play almost nobody. I just don't think the Steelers are interested in doing that. And also, I don't think it's going to be a smooth transition just because those are two totally different positions on the NFL field. And to ask somebody to do that and then replace them with a rookie that maybe you're not super confident in, I think it's easier to go the other way around just because a lot of rookies at some point in their college career play some sort of slot corner. At some point they're there as a freshman or whatever. They're moving inside just to get some experience, and teams are just trying to get them on the field before they're that full-blown outside word dominant corner type of guy. Here's what I want to talk about next. Size matters. We all know it, and it's important to remember it in times of need. I recently went to a small law firm in hopes of getting the compensation I felt I deserved. I didn't, and to this day, I still think about the money that I may have missed out on. I filled out mounds of paperwork, then waited around for what felt like forever, got phone call after phone call telling me what I did not do right in the process, and it was expensive. All to get underwhelming compensation and almost zero satisfaction. Fortunately, if you ever get seriously injured and want to file a claim, you don't have to go through the same hassle I did. Instead, you can make it way easier by finding out if you have a claim in just a few clicks on your phone and working with America's biggest injury law firm with the promise of being for the people. Here comes Morgan & Morgan, today's sponsor. Morgan & Morgan has over 1,000 attorneys working in all 50 states fighting to get their clients the money they deserve. In recent months, they've achieved verdicts for their clients, including one that is worth $26 million. That is 40 times the highest insurance offer. And they're absolutely free unless you win. I got lowballed. Don't make the same mistake I did. Fighting big companies takes a big firm, and with America's biggest injury law firm, you're ready to take on insurance companies of any size. Don't overthink it. You can start your claim in just a few clicks by following the link in our description or by going to www.forthepeople.com/allsteelers. It only takes a few minutes to find out if you have a case, and if you have, it might be worth millions. Let me ask you about two names. I got two current people on the Steelers roster that I think might be an option for the Steelers when it comes to the slot, but I'm not totally sure I'm sold on either of them. I don't know if you're sold on either of them. The first one's Darius Rush. Obviously signed with them midseason last year, didn't really do much, stepped in when he really needed to when the injuries were building up, played safety and the slot, has a ton of experience as a slot corner. I mean, maybe he's fourth, fifth round pick last year. And I think people looked at him and said, this guy's got some upside. I think the Steelers looked at him and said, hey, look at somehow we got this guy and we feel pretty good about what he could bring. The other name is Trenton Thompson, who played safety last year, definitely emerged. I don't know that he's got a role as a safety this season just because the Steelers added Deshaun Elliott. Thank you. And their room is going to be Minka Fitzpatrick, DeMonte KZ, Deshaun Elliott, and Miles Killebrew. There's your four safeties. They typically only keep four safeties. Last year was like a different situation because Elijah Riley was kind of like that mix and match, just defensive back that, I mean, maybe they go after again this year. Who knows? But this year, I think Trenton Thompson could kind of be that like mix guy. He has some experience playing nickel. I think he's physical enough to play nickel. I mean, are those two options that you think the Steelers would realistically consider?
At this point, it does seem like they're considering at least Darius Rush. I mean, Rush is the one I think. I mean, obviously, because he actually plays corner, I'd be a little bit, more sure of. Thompson, I really like Trenton Thompson. Like, he played pretty well when he stepped in last year to kind of fill the gap at safety.
Yeah.
But I always thought of him as more of like a physical, a run stopper, a guy who can come down and make plays in the box as opposed to a cover guy. That's why I'd feel a little bit more comfortable with Rush out there. And I love the talent that Rush has. Like, he's clearly got some. It's just a wonder why. I mean, so many holes at corner last year. Like, why Darius Rush could never even. I mean, he barely even got a helmet on game days. Like, it was tough to even get him into the mix. So I'm just curious about that. He seems like a project, and if he didn't really get any NFL experience last year, like, how's he better than last year? I guess is my question. I'm not counting him out at all. I mean, right now he might be their best option, quite honestly. But it's iffy. I mean, I'm optimistic about Rush though. I think like he could end up being a contributor at some point during his NFL career, whether it's right now. I mean, just either way, you're throwing one of these guys into the fire when they haven't done this.
They should not be the fire. Yeah.
Right. Like, this is and I don't know. I don't want to get completely I don't want to blow the slot corner option completely out of proportion, but it's a pretty glaring hole, and they don't.
I was going to say it's a pretty significant. Like, it's a need that like you've brought up for years now when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's like they need a slot corner, and they just always seem to. I mean, when they had Mike Hilton, even what Mike Hilton was doing at times, people were not satisfied with. They were like, this guy can't cover well enough. You need somebody who could cover better. You're getting blown up. I mean, in the NFL today, like, your slot guy is. I mean, he does so much, and the Steelers, they face teams who have dominant slot guys. Like, Amari Cooper can move inside to the slot. Jamar Chase can move inside to the slot. Tyler Boyd was a slot guy for a long time. You went to Buffalo, you had to face Stephon Diggs, and the Steelers are talking about Joey Porter Jr. moving in and following him all season or all game long. Like, Devontae Adams could play the slot super well. Like, you're gonna face guys that are just really, really good slot wide receivers. You need to have a good slot corner, and they just don't. They don't have any. Let me ask this: would you rather bring Patrick Peterson back, because that seems to be like the name that everybody's talking about, or maybe like bring back Chandon Sullivan over giving a Darius Rush or a Trenton Thompson, or maybe even like a DeMonte KZ, because DeMonte KZ's got plenty of experience playing nickel. A shot being the guy on the inside.
I'm not really interested in bringing Patrick Peterson back. Like, I think that, I don't know, that relationship kind of played its course. Like, he did his job last year, and I would look somewhere different this year. KZ, sure, but that just, I don't know. I don't think you need to, like, I don't know, just using a retread and like trying to use a stopgap, solution for this. Like, that's why I like Rush, like, because I feel like that could be a semi long term solution there if it works out. Like, if I'm doing this, if I'm looking for a solution, I would rather go young. I would rather go with someone who has some upside, could eventually maybe play some outside. Like, I don't know. I don't want to try to fit a guy like a KZ or even a Patrick Peterson, like a guy who hasn't done this before, into this spot. I would rather find someone young, find someone who's maybe closer to, just like time-wise, closer to having some experience there. And I don't know, just like has some upside. Like, I don't know. I don't think this defense needs to just like put a 30-year-old Band-Aid on this problem. Like, I think you need to go a little younger. I think you need to look for a little bit higher upside than just, well, this guy won't embarrass us, Like, I think we can aim a little bit higher than that.
Yeah, I agree. To talk about Nate Wiggins, because I think that's the next step in finding a slot corner is the NFL draft. If you're not going to find one in free agency, and you're, I mean, potentially going to give an option to, but they're going to bring in competition either way. Like, there's no way they're going to walk into training camp and say, all right, Darius Rush, that's our slot guy. That's it. We made the decision. That was it. That's our guy. There's no chance that they're going to do that.